Oh, I think the tariffs are going to be the greatest thing we've ever done as a country. It's going to make our country rich again. We have many companies, as you know, auto companies are opening up plants now. We've had 4 or 5 announced already, but many more are coming. And we're basically going to take back the money, a lot of the money that we've given away over many decades.
That's why I've been crystal clear. Until these tariffs are off the table, until the threat of tariffs is gone for good, Ontario will not relent. We will not back down. Pausing some tariffs, making last-minute exemptions, it won't cut it. We need to end the chaos once and for all. We need to sit down, work together, and land a fair deal. A deal that gives businesses the confidence to invest. A deal that gives workers the security they need and deserve. Until then, Ontario will keep up the fight. We will apply maximum pressure to maximize our leverage. That's why today we're moving forward with a 25% surcharge on electricity exports. For the 1.5 million American homes and businesses that Ontario powers, homes and businesses in Minnesota, Michigan, and New York. This surcharge will cost families and businesses in these states up to $400,000 each and every single day. On an average, this will add around $100 per month to the bills of hardworking Americans. Let me be clear, I will not hesitate to increase this charge. If necessary, if the United States escalates, I will not hesitate to shut the electricity off completely. Believe me when I say I do not want to do this. I feel terrible for the American people because it's not the American people who started this trade war. It's one person who's responsible. That's President Trump. I'd rather be working together.
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me on, Boris. And I start off every interview with telling Americans that Canadians love Americans. I love Americans. It's one person that's caused this problem, and that's President Trump. As he is putting tariffs on us, even if he says he's putting it on hold, there's still 60% of goods that are crossing the borders that will be tariffed, and it's hurting both economies. It's hurting the American economy. It's hurting the Canadian economy. Uncertainty is what people don't like hearing in general life, not to mention the markets are tumbling, and investors from around the world are looking twice at America and Canada to invest in. There's no reason for a recession. I call it the self-made Donald Trump recession. He ran on a mandate to lower prices, to make sure we didn't have inflation, to create more jobs, and it's backfired. So let's sit down at the table and let's start working on a new USMCA deal, even though President Trump said it was the greatest deal he's ever made. Nothing's changed, so I guess it's not the greatest deal now. No, we're looking at negotiating through strength. If he cuts off the lumber or puts a tariff, do you know whose costs are going up? It's the American people that want to buy a home. They're going to pay more for their home, or steel that they need, or aluminum that is only 16% of aluminum's manufactured in the U.S. They rely on over 60% aluminum to come down there for their goods. High grade nickel coming out of Ontario, that 50% of the high-grade nickel for your military, aerospace, and manufacturing comes from Ontario. And the list keeps going on and on and on, not to mention the 4.3 million barrels of crude oil that we ship down every single day. So I believe in building an AMCAN fortress. Let's make sure that we focus on having the 2 greatest countries in the world, the most prosperous, the richest, the safest. The problem's not Canada, it's China right now. And he has to keep an eye on China. Well, what I'd like to do is sit down and discuss these issues with them at a USMCA table. What I will tell you this, if we take the 4.3 million barrels a day that we ship down there to keep your economy going off the balance sheet, the U.S. has a $56 billion surplus, a trade surplus with Canada. I'm okay with that. That's fine. Things were going fine. Everything was moving forward. Market was going up a little bit. Everyone was optimistic. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he wants to attack his closest neighbor and ally. And his number I call their number one customer. You don't attack your number one customer and expect the results that he thought were going to happen. Protectionism does not work, especially between Canada and the U.S. Maybe you should take a page out of Ronald Reagan's book. Well, Mr. Carney is a very, very bright individual, and it's up to Mr. Carney to build that relationship with President Trump. They're both bright people. Let's make no mistake about it. Agree or disagree with President Trump. He understands finances. So does Mark Carney, and so do I. We're business people, and if we sit down around the table, we can resolve the problem and make sure that both countries prosper, like the likes of which this country's never seen, or the likes of which the U.S. has never seen, if we work together.
We are seeing the beginning of what could turn into a trade war, with China's retaliatory tariffs on many U.S. farm products going into effect today. It's in response to President Trump's tariffs on China, nearly all imports from there that he raised to 20% last week. China is the largest overseas market for U.S. farm products. They are imposing tariffs on American chicken, wheat, and corn, along with soybeans, pork, beef, fruit, and others. The escalation is on top of the back and forth tariffs levied, then partially delayed on Mexico and Canada. The uncertainty impacting U.S. and global stock markets, the major U.S. indices all starting the week down after a rough last week for Wall Street. Two major indices having their worst since September. Adding to the uncertainty is the president's answer to this question Sunday, acknowledging the possibility of a recession.
Are you expecting a recession this year?
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America.
This morning, the White House's top economic advisor, Kevin Hassett, argued that the uncertainty is actually working in the U.S.'s favor.
What I'm seeing in the jobs number, for example, is that the uncertainty is actually creating jobs in the U.S. Right now, we just saw 10,000 manufacturing jobs created in the U.S.
Now, in that interview, Hassett did acknowledge the concerns of many Americans about the economy, and there is potentially more instability ahead. First, the government could shut down by the end of the week if Congress doesn't pass a budget. And then there's Japan, with looming tariffs, sending a delegation this week here to Washington, D.C. for trade talks. At the White House, I'm Brian Abel reporting.
Let's talk about Mark Carney. I mean, this is a very, very accomplished individual. We're talking Harvard-educated, Oxford-educated, former governor of the Bank of Canada, former governor of the Bank of England, the only non-British person to have that role, by the way. He led Canada and steered Canada through the 2008 financial crisis as well. So clearly, when it comes to having economic chops, I mean, he is the man. But given what's happening with the United States right now, you really need somebody who is a talented politician. You think about how the Mexican president, Claudia Sheinbaum, has handled Donald Trump. I mean, it's been a mix of sort of being strong and firm and standing her own ground, while at the same time allowing for a diplomatic off-ramp. That seems to be the language that Donald Trump understands. How will Mark Carney, I mean, obviously he understands how to deal with this economically in terms of retaliatory tariffs. Does he have what it takes at this point, given that he has no experience in terms of elected office? Does he have what it takes to handle this diplomatically and politically?
I think it's really the most important question. And, you know, as central bank governor, Mark Carney has held public office, as you mentioned, during major meltdowns, also during Brexit when he was Bank of England governor. Those are actually political jobs. They're just not overtly political in the elected sense that we're used to. And the reality is, even though he's been in the public eye for so many years, really throughout his career, we don't know that much about him. What we do know is that he's been in the room when very difficult conversations have been held in those previous roles. His challenge really right now is not just that he needs to reboot the relationship with Donald Trump. We know that Donald Trump did not get along with Justin Trudeau, and perhaps that influenced part of the predicament the relationship is in right now. But he's also going to have to call a federal election very soon. That means he's going to have to lean into that aggressive anti-Trump, anti-US rhetoric. That's what Canada wants right now. That's what voters are looking for. But that may not play very well when he is in the room or he's on the phone with President Trump.
Exactly.
And he is promising to go toe to toe. He said that he would be prepared for a dollar for dollar retaliatory tariff. Also said he's prepared to the U.S.-Canadian exports to be tariffed as well. And Canada is the largest supplier of energy to the United States, we should note. It's interesting, the Donald Trump effect, because as accomplished as Mark Carney is, I don't know how familiar he was to every Canadian prior to the last few months. And now here you have a Liberal Party that's neck and neck with the Conservative Party, and in terms of playing to his advantage, when do you expect to see a general election called? It has to be called by October, but given how close these two parties are now in polling, do you think it will happen much sooner?
It has to happen sooner, in fact. Mark Carney does not hold a seat in Parliament. He will be sworn in as Prime Minister, but he needs to call a federal election as soon as possible. His party, the Liberals, do not command a majority in the House of Commons here in Parliament. That means that what we understand from his team, what he said to people already, our reporting shows that he will be calling a federal election. So my bets, I'm not a betting woman, is that we will have an election in the course of May. And that will mean that we are entering a very intense campaigning period. He's going to have to carry on with that energy he's built up over the last 2 months trying to secure his party's vote. But the new audience will not be the party faithful who rallied around him in such a dramatic way last night here in Ottawa. It will be the entire population who are fatigued after 10 years of Trudeau, are terrified and angry with the Trump threat. And so they'll be looking to him for real answers, and there'll be more scrutiny on him.
How seriously are Canadians taking Donald Trump's threat to make Canada the 51st state? I mean, based on what I'm seeing in terms of, comments from Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney, they are taking it extremely serious. I mean, Donald Trump went so far as referring to Justin Trudeau as governor many, many times. Take us through that.
Sure. And, I should say they're taking it deadly seriously. And they have some reason for that. Last week, we had an exclusive report in the New York Times. My sources, 4 individuals directly familiar with communications between the president and Prime Minister Trudeau, who said that in an early February phone call between the two men, President Trump, while raising trade concerns and irritants in their relationship that we know he's upset about, also raised the 1908 border treaty between the two countries and called that into question. He also raised questions about how the two countries manage their shared water resources. These are pretty existential things for Canadians. And so they're taking it very seriously. The government is taking it seriously. The opposition Conservative Party is taking it seriously, which I think speaks to just the gravity of the moment. It's not a joke, and it goes well beyond the trolling online.